Welcome to the Higher Order Podcast, where we embark on a journey to explore life's deepest questions through the lens of the Christian worldview. We live in a world filled with uncertainty, where the search for meaning often feels overwhelming. Whether you're wrestling with the concept of purpose, grappling with the idea of good and evil, or simply trying to understand why suffering exists, you're not alone. This podcast is for the skeptics, the seekers, and those who find themselves at a crossroads. We'll dive into the heart of faith, examining its relevance in today's society, and how it can provide answers to life's deepest questions. Join us as we come together to elevate to a higher order.
When it's raining outside, I'm inside. Right, bro? I can't rap, bro.
Nah, you can, bro. You can.
Only
Christian
when
the rapper.
Only when the cameras are off.
Christian rapper.
I get a little shy when put in the spotlight. You know?
Yo, we'll just turn the camera off and then we'll let you spit, bro.
That's it, bro.
Okay.
Yo, boys.
This is the third episode.
Episode number 3.
Amen.
Third
Sound
episode.
That's what's up.
Let
Good
me hear the
Lord.
church clap. Let me hear the church clap.
God is that good. He's allowed us to do this 3 times, bro.
3 times.
And for many more to come.
Fingers crossed.
Amen.
Fingers crossed.
God willing.
So, guys, how is your week going by so far? Anything interesting? Anything not so interesting?
Let me think.
Wait, guys, we just bought our plane tickets today.
Oh,
We're going to Brazil.
Yo,
Brazil.
we might be filming from Rio, Brazil, maybe during the summer. So we
From
keep
the
you guys
beach.
posted.
Janeiro. I'm
From the
definitely bringing
beach.
my camera.
We're going to be interviewing people, bro.
Interviewing people?
In the street.
Really?
No, I'm kidding. I don't know.
Oh, that's a possibility, bro.
It's a possibility.
I know you're gonna try to
Just
bring
gotta
your
be careful.
camera, so
Yeah, my old camera.
Yeah, you just gotta. Yeah, you gotta hide that, bro.
not the
Yeah.
camera that we're using now for the podcast.
Nah,
Yeah, nah.
It's a little too pricey for it.
That's a
little too
special one.
pricey.
Yeah.
And I'm still paying it off, so.
It's like a car loan, bro.
Yeah, dude.
Sure.
Serious stuff.
But not as serious as this podcast.
Nah, you're right.
Serious.
So
You're right.
let's dive into it.
I like it.
So essentially, guys, we are gonna talk about a very interesting topic that I think is something that we all deal with on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Our identities, our self-worth, our self-regard. I feel like there's 5 things that every human being needs to look for in order to make sense of life. They need meaning, they need hope, they need a structure for morality, they need freedom, and they need an identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're going to try to talk about today. Everyone needs to forge one, everyone needs to develop one. But what exactly does the Christian faith have to say about identity? That's what we're going to try to talk about during today's podcast.
Yeah. I honestly loved when you brought up the idea of identity, because it's something that doesn't change with time. I feel like identity is just, it's individual, and it's also like community based. You know what I mean? Like it's like timeless, kind of a timeless topic.
It's a lot of philosophers have considered it the primordial desire, something that brings humanity together. What exactly makes us human? That's the question of identity. And what do you guys think about that? Us being Christians, coming from a more biblical understanding of humanity, what makes humanity unique amongst other perspectives? Maybe, Olivia, you could elaborate on that.
I would say what separates humans from all the other animals is that we're created in God's image. That means we are made in God's likeness. Not that we are God, but that we reflect his attributes. Now, obviously, this has been corrupted by sin, but we are still his image bearers.
Yeah. Genesis 1:27.
Yes, sir.
You got the verse right on deck.
I'm locked, bro. Yeah, I looked it up right before this podcast. So no, I'm just
Which is kind of unique in the sense because I feel like when that passage was being written during the time of, the beginning, that is. But most Jewish historians would say that Moses wrote the book of Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
Them coming out of Egyptian slavery, seeing a hierarchy take place, or Pharaoh was the only one to be considered made in the image of the divine. Why is that concept so revolutionary compared to all the other ancient and even modern societies today that try to give a uniqueness to all of mankind? Like, that seems very counterintuitive to what we see in many cultures. Every culture operates on a hierarchy. Mm-hmm. People of power, people of influence are deemed to be more special, of greater influence in society. But the Bible says that regardless of your race, your gender, your economic background, there is a value and there is a beauty to all of humanity because they're made in God's image and likeness.
I would say that it makes the Christian worldview different because it puts everybody on equal footing. Mm-hmm. There's nobody that's truly better than everybody else. And I believe there's this Proverbs, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it essentially keeps it really simple that the rich and poor have this alike. God made them both, right? It doesn't matter how rich you are or how poor you are on this side of eternity. We're essentially like both going to the grave. We're really heading to the same destination and stuff.
You're right. You know what's funny? You saying that reminds me of like old Egyptian culture where they valued the afterlife, but their perspective on the afterlife obviously did not correlate to the Christian perspective of what eternity looked like. They added their wealth to the preparation for death, right?
It's crazy.
So they would have these valuable perfumes and like the best like decorum and all this like golden stuff for their graves. You know, they would add all of this like, you know, this expensive process to
only the people of prominent status would receive a proper burial.
Yeah.
Other people, their bones would be literally just thrown on the streets to die.
Yeah.
But you see people like Pharaoh, they would receive a proper burial in a tomb.
You know what's kind of interesting that you bring that up? It reminds me of the parable of like the rich man and Lazarus, right? So the rich man, he obviously lived an extravagant life during his time on earth, while Lazarus was essentially his servant. But what you see in this parable, which, you know, many scholars say it could actually be a literal story, because it's, I believe, the only parable where Jesus addresses people like by name and stuff. So it's quite interesting that Lazarus has his name in the afterlife, but the rich man, he doesn't have a name. He's just identified as the rich man, which goes back into what we're talking about in regards to identity. And what you were essentially saying, how like the rich in the Egyptian culture, they had all these special preparations for death, thinking that in a way they'd be able to carry that stuff in the afterlife, right? But what we see in the rich man and Lazarus, that, you know, story that Jesus told, is that the rich man was left with nothing, while Lazarus, who was poor on earth, he has everything, more than everything. And he still has his name. He still has his identity. While the rich man, since his identity was just his wealth, like he's just the rich man.
I think it sheds light to what Paul writes in 1 Corinthians, that God decided to choose the weak things of this world to shame the strong.
Yep.
And God chose the foolish things of this world to shame the wise. It seems to be the case that God, throughout the Bible, always chooses the person that everyone has rejected, the people that are on the lower end of the hierarchy in society, because God takes it very seriously that humanity is made in his image and his likeness. How does that correlate back to identity, though? since that's what we're, trying to speak upon right now.
I think in a secular perspective, I see that, or you can kind of argue that identity is very external. It's very much like what you bring to the table, and sort of that's kind of what we were mentioning a little bit in the beginning. But that external kind of like, okay, where's your status? Like, where's your position in life? Are you successful? Are you educated? Like, what's the highest form of education that you have? What's what's your salary? Like, what's your, like, all of these, it's almost like all numbers, right? Like how famous are you? How many people know you? How many followers do you have? So the bigger the number, the
more value a person has.
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
In the secular perspective, right? And the one that, might not have as many followers, or might not have the luxurious car or job, or the title that everyone wants, right? In life, that shiny identity. But like where when Christ comes into play, I believe it's in Galatians. I could pull it up. It's 3:28. When Jesus comes into play, and there is a gift of salvation through faith, he gives us this. Yeah, I highlighted it. For you are all children of God through faith in Christ Jesus, and all who have been united with Christ in baptism have put on Christ, like putting on new clothes. There is no longer Jew or Gentile, slave or free, male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. So faith in Christ Jesus now brings to light that we are all under God one. And it even, corresponds to like the church, right? Like being in one body. There's the difference, that kind of clash in the secular perspective versus with Christ.
What you said right now about the secular perspective, that one develops their identity upon external factors, status, power, influence,
wealth,
Yep.
All of these counterfeit idols, as we see in our contemporary society.
Counterfeit gods. Tim Keller.
Shout out to TK. It reminds me that during the Last Supper, when Jesus is sitting down with his apostles, what were they talking about? Who's the greatest in the kingdom? And they start laying out all of their credentials, all the things that they've achieved throughout their 30 plus years of life.
But Jesus goes on and says,
the greatest in the kingdom is not the one that is willing to be served, but those who are willing to lay down their lives and serve others.
Yeah.
It seems to be a common theme throughout the entire Bible that Christ literally reverses the world's orders inside out. To be at the top is to learn how to start from the bottom. And we see this exemplified in the life of Christ, him being the highest in the kingdom, with all of his eternal glory, his splendor, and his majesty. He comes down and resonates with the lowest, because that's true power. And I think that's the fulfillment of identity, to resonate with those that are very much unlike you, knowing that there's a commonality among all of us, that we're made in we have the fingerprint of the divine imprinted on our souls, to be made in God's image and likeness.
Yeah.
To take that seriously is to recognize that there's no such thing as ordinary people, but that God sees them as worthy to die for. Once we start to develop that mentality, earth will be as it is in heaven.
Yeah, dude.
It's interesting, Phil, how you brought up that in today's society, your value is determined by what you can contribute, right? So external factors determine your value, determine your identity. But I also feel like we live in a culture of self-assertion where people choose their own identity. They choose their own worth. And maybe, Christian, you can explain how that can also be equally as dangerous.
So basically, I feel like there is a philosopher named by Charles Taylor. He's a Canadian thinker. He wrote this book called A Secular Age, where he essentially lays out the way in which modern people develop an identity. He calls it the inside-out approach. In order to discover who you really are, you don't go out into the community or into the church or into God for them to tell you who are you supposed to be. You look deep down inside into what you think is right, and you try to impose that upon the community. I am this, I am that. You look into your inmost desires.
Dangerous.
Which I think is somewhat dangerous in the sense that it's incoherent. I mean, let's be honest. If we look into the most fundamental parts of our hearts, we will find that we have many desires that are in constant contradiction with each other. Let's say you want to be highly successful in your career. You want to be head honcho working 70, 80 hours a week. But at the very same time, you want to develop a stable family structure. You want to have a wife. You want to have kids. But since those two desires are in contradiction with each other, which desire is more fundamentally you? And given that our modern society doesn't give us a standard of what is right and what is wrong, it's going to be very difficult to filter out which desires should be acted upon and which desires should not be acted upon. It leads to incoherency because your desires are always changing.
How would you know, like, who you are?
Who you really are.
Your desires always fluctuate.
Yeah.
It can be here one day and gone the next.
Right.
And you know what? I just want to mention this really quickly. I feel like, especially in our generation, our mid-20s.
The Gen Z.
Gen Z, right? I feel like there is an identity crisis, where people it's come to a level of desperateness, where if you don't have a clear, concise identity in something specific, then you don't belong. You're essentially excluded, right? Like there's that exclusion. But there's this kind of desperate urge to be either in a specific trend or in a specific, I think that's the pressure as to why, like, people, do trends and do like influencer mania. Like, that's like all the hype now. And I feel like it's because people are desperately trying to find their identity, when since the beginning we've been created, like our whole creation has been fundamentally to serve God. Like we have this innate deep desire to serve him, but when you do not know him, you don't know what that feeling is. You can't put a finger on it. So you try desperately to identify with whatever is the most accessible, right? Or the most kind of like the most not famous, but the most known, or the most just easily accessible group, right? Like you just try to identify yourself with like whatever trend or whatever everyone is doing at that moment. Like that's what you're doing too, because you're just desperately trying to find a place in life.
It kind of shows that the modern approach to identity is kind of imaginative. There's no concreteness to it.
Yeah.
There's no authentic self, because we're simply going on the basis of what is popular, what is prevalent, what's going to make me be liked by people.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about the more modern identity, but there is also a traditional approach to identity, which I think is also somewhat dangerous. To try your best to be accepted by, let's say, your parents or by the church, which I think is also performance-based.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
That could also be very crushing as well. But Phil, you're talking about finding your identity not in oneself, not in one's family, not in the church, but ultimately in God. How does that create an identity that is not fragile, but stable throughout different circumstances of life?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Olivier could answer that question.
So could you repeat that again?
Why is it that the Christian approach to identity, unlike the more modern or traditional approaches that's based on your performance, why does the Christian approach produce an identity that is not fragile but stable across time and across space?
I believe that the Christian framework gives you an identity that is more stable because it's not something that you had to earn or work for, but it's something that was given to you as a free gift.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to essentially walk on eggshells wondering, oh, can I still keep up? Because Christ has already finished the work for you on the cross. And your identity as a child of God, as a son, as a daughter, can't be taken away from you.
I also want to add on to that. I also believe that God never changes. He's never changing. He's the rock, right? Like Christ is the firm foundation, the rock. He will never change. Our desires might change, right? Like our emotions will fluctuate, right? Sometimes our the things that we base our identities on in a secular perspective, like, all of these factors, they're all
Subject to change.
exactly. They're in a way kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They're
Imperfect saviors.
yeah. In a way, like it's unstable. It's unstable, but God
Rocky ground.
exactly. But God is constant. He's never changing. So if you base your identity on a never changing God, on one who is consistent and one who offers unconditional love, no matter the circumstances, then that's where the fragility is broken, right? Like there is no, like, it's not fragile. It's not wavering. It's not wavering. It does not shake. It does not break. It's constant. It's firm. It's forever.
Because
I think
it's
that's the difference.
predicated upon the one that is ultimately stable within himself. He has the
Exactly.
identity of identity.
Yeah.
He's complete and fully whole within himself.
Yeah.
The Father, Son, and the Spirit.
Amen.
I think you wanted to add something.
Oh, I was actually looking up a Bible verse on my phone because I was just thinking about how we were talking about how our modern way of trying to gain an identity has to do with self-assertion. But in the gospel, the way you receive an identity is through self-denial, right? So Jesus says in Luke 17, verse 33, whoever tries to keep their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life will preserve it. To be a disciple of Christ is to die to your flesh, to die to your passions and desires, your dreams, the things that you want, right? Jesus tells Nicodemus that to enter into the kingdom, you need to be born again, right? You need to be transformed, right? But we kind of live in a culture which tells you, oh, you just have to be yourself. You have to find yourself. You have to just do whatever you want and do whatever's best for you. But in the gospel, it's the
Self-care.
complete opposite. Self-care.
Yeah.
Self-love.
Sure. That's... And we see that even within our own selves sometimes too. Like, I feel like the reasons why we don't live up to the standard that God has called us to live up to is because we're trying to base our identity upon something else that's not God. And man, that leads to most of the dysfunction in the world now. Trying to build our self-worth and our self-regard on things that ultimately do not give us what we're looking for.
Yeah. It's like we were saying before, like you were saying, it's incoherent. Like there are times where desires and identities, they don't coincide with one another. Like they don't mend well together. And like we were saying before, like at times they can even be unstable, right? Our desires may change. They may fluctuate. So if our identities are based on our inner selves and our inner desires and what we think is best, those things that we might think is best might change. And also, especially today, it can also be like just based on pure illusion, like just pure falsehood. Like you even believing that you have an identity that's not even true to yourself, or to what should be your identity, right? Like I feel like now more than ever, there's just this facade of people kind of showing their identity, especially out in, social platforms, and like we were talking about this earlier today, and how everyone is posting only their highlights, right? Like I remember you mentioned that.
Instagram, Twitter, I think it's called X now.
Oh yeah, they just changed that up.
Social media is simply highlights, but they're not real life.
No, yeah, and I mentioned too, like earlier today, even the moments that are difficult that people post, because now that's also kind of trending, right? Like people are posting like, oh, you guys see this side of me, and there's like a lot of, happy moments and parties and stuff like that. And then they'll show videos of like, oh, but you don't see this side of me. And there'll be moments of like when they're like crying or they're just upset. And it's a very thin line to where you're asking yourself like, are you filming this to like perform and to show like
to acquire attention?
Exactly. Like, is this more like a continuous performance? Like we understand and we know, like we're aware that Instagram is all highlights, right? We understand that people are only posting their best selves, their best pictures, their best selfies, their best whatever. We know that. We're aware of that. It's not new to anybody. We know that. We do it ourselves, right?
Sure.
We're gonna, at least me. This is me though. Like I take like 15 selfies and I'm like, you know what? Let me not post it at all. Like, it's, like it. We want the best of the best out there, but now there's this even new movement of like, this is the real me, and it's like it'll show. But is that even the real you? Like, are you trying to show like, maybe like your intention is to like show people like you don't have to be perfect all the time, but you're still in a way kind of performing for that audience, right? Like you're showing. Like, did you cry? Like, I just think of like, did you cry? And then think like, let me get my cell phone for this. And they just start filming themselves. Like, you know what I mean?
We're trying to make, go ahead.
Whenever I've had an emotional moment, which we've all had, I don't think the thought has come across that, oh, let me just grab my tripod.
Let me just share this out real quick.
Put my phone up on this stand and just start recording myself.
Yeah.
I feel a little awkward to be like, why am I doing this? You know?
Like I've seen, videos of people like being in a breakdown, like they're literally having a breakdown, but they're talking through it. And they're like, I'm going through this right now. And I want you guys to know that, like it's almost like in their own way, like therapeutic, right? And they like, they talk about what they're going through and everything like that. Like I can see that being like, just as a form of like
venting,
yeah. Right? But like the fact of like, there are people that are really like poor. I'm just going to mention this real quick because I feel like I've been talking about this forever. I want to keep just talking about social media.
People crying on social media.
Yeah, it's not
social media.
It's not what we're here for. Which is really quickly, I also mentioned this. I saw this video and it was sickening, dude. Like I started to feel sick to my stomach. I was like, oh, like how can, like, oh my goodness. So there was this mother and she had her son with her. And they were in the car and she's like this social media, like social influencer.
I think I've seen this video.
Yeah. She posts stuff on YouTube. And she always makes like these really, it's more for kids. Like her content is like for kids. So the thumbnail's got to be really like, oh my God, like super dramatic. Right. And she has her son and something sad actually happened. I can't remember what had happened, but I can't remember what happened, but it was sad enough to where the child was actually crying. And she looked at her son and she's like, okay, here, put your hands up like this. Cover your hands like this. And he's like, Mom, like, I'm actually crying. Like, why are you doing this? And she's like, I know. It's just, we got to take a picture for the thumbnail. Just make it look good. Here, put your hands up. No, pout more. And he's like, Mom, why? And he's listening to his mother being directed on how to cry as she's trying to, like, do you understand that that's detrimental to a child's mental health? Like, let alone, like, you know, your own self. Like, this mother now has this such like a fixed identity on who she's portraying online when it's all a falsehood. Like, her child is there weeping because of this, like, whatever tragedy that happened, and the mother does not have any care for her child's well-being. All she cares about is her identity online, and just being like, we just got to make this look really, really good and really real and really dramatic so that the numbers can go up and we could get more money and we could get a bigger following. Like, that's all that mother cared about, when her real intention should be for her child, like for her child's well-being. And I just saw that and I was like this is ridiculous.
Chronically
like, it's
online.
It's so sad because although short term, sure, she's getting attention, probably making some form of revenue, but the long-term ramifications, those are things that can never be undone. You know, it leads to an identity that is an illusion to a degree, because we are what the media says we are. We are what people say we are, or we are who we say we are. But these things always falter, you know. People's attention, man, it's hard to gain people's attention. It's a lot more difficult to maintain it as well. And we're all replaceable, which goes back again to the identity that, you know, modern man has tried to establish, that it's very unstable. But amen, in God, in the Christian faith, you have an identity that is not achieved through performance but received by grace.
Amen.
And that's probably the most liberating thing that one could experience, because unlike the culture, unlike the media, they applaud you when you're succeeding and you get a big head, you get a big ego, and they'll criticize you or condemn you when you don't live up to their standard. It crushes your heart. It brings dryness to your soul.
I believe it was Lecrae that said that if you live for people's approval, you'll
die from their rejection.
You'll die by their rejection.
Oh yeah, and he knows that. He knows that by experience. You know, I mean, everyone's replaceable. Everyone will eventually, you know, you receive trends on social media today. Tomorrow it's going to be somebody else.
Yeah,
beauty standards change too.
Yeah.
True.
What's in right now may not be what's it in 20 years.
No, you're right.
Absolutely.
You're right. Did you even super off tangent right now? But it's just like, it kind of like fits into what we're saying. Like, someone that you would, who's okay, right? We didn't talk about this before. Just so y'all know, I just want to see if they can get it. Who would you think is like the Hollywood, like, movie star, like action movie star, like big bad brolic, everyone knows him, he's almost in like every movie? Like, who comes up and like everyone loves him, and he's just in the movies he's always portrayed as like the strongest, like just best person in the whole world, essentially.
I forget his name. He's the guy that plays Thor, right?
No, that's not what I thought.
Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson?
See, that's the one I was getting for. One zip. I'm just kidding. Yeah, The Rock, dude. Like, everyone is like, oh yeah, The Rock. He's like in every movie. He's like the big, but
yeah.
But there's like some drama that happened between like him and, I think it was like Oprah. Like, there was like a donation scam that happened, and he was like a part of it or something like that. And dude, like, he went to like he like does like fake like WWE.
This guy does it all.
Yeah, dude. He does like movies, WWE, wrestling. Raw. Yeah, exactly. Dude showed up and the whole stadium booed him out. Like, booed him.
Wow.
Yeah. And for a solid, like, dude, like 5 minutes, just people booing. And he was just looking around. and people were all just saying like, dude, you could see how he just lost it all. You know, like he's just looking around, like literally seeing like, dude, I had everyone shout, like these people were shouting my name like a few weeks ago, like a month ago. And now I'm back here and I lost it all because of a mistake that he essentially made. Like, not everyone is perfect, right? But it just goes to show like how quickly you could lose that, man. Like The Rock, you would think that like now, like if you search up The Rock and like latest news, like it's all over, you know, like it's just how quickly and how fragile your identity can be if not
you build
grounded.
it upon man's approval,
Exactly.
as opposed to God's perfect approval.
You know what this reminds me of? And I'm not trying to compare Dwayne The Rock Johnson to Jesus, because we know that we know that Jesus is perfect, right? He's sinless.
Right.
However, it reminds me of Holy Week in the Bible, where on Palm Sunday, Jesus was entering into Jerusalem and people were crying, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest, blessed be the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Yet just a few days later, these same people were crying, crucify him, free Barabbas, spitting on him, humiliating him, putting a crown of thorns on him, clinging him to the cross. But Jesus didn't base his identity on, people's approval of him or people's acceptance of him.
Yeah.
Even when, he faced challenges from even when he faced pushback from his own disciples, he still continued to do what God, his Father, wanted him to do. Yesterday at AGWV, and as we mentioned before, AGWV is just a church community that we all go to. Michael Porf, who hopefully will be on the podcast one day.
Oh, boy.
He was essentially talking about, he brought up this verse, I believe in the book of John, where Jesus talks about, my food is doing the will of my Father in heaven, right? And when we think of food, what does food do to us, right? It sustains us, right? So Jesus' identity wasn't sustained by what other people thought of him or other people's approval of what he did, but it was sustained by pleasing God, right? Now we know that us as Christians, as humans, right? We know that in our own flesh, we can't please God, right? Like even our best deeds are essentially filthy rags to him, right? Because our good actions can have underlying false motives under them, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
But as we talked about before, the Christian identity isn't one that is earned, but it's one that's received.
Yeah.
Because Christ was able to fully, perfectly follow and submit to the will of God, right? We are able to receive an identity that is as perfect as his, right? It's the great reversal, as we talked about in previous episodes.
Wow.
I also just want to say, and I never thought of this until you brought it up just now, but Jesus didn't, we know it. Like, if you say it out loud, you know it. But to really think about it, like, Jesus didn't even need the approval of his own disciples. Like
His closest friends.
And you would think, like, essentially, that's probably one of the most influential people in our lives is our closest friends, right? Like imagine like you're with your boys and all of your boys kind of essentially, like you would want not simply their approval, but you would hope that, there's some...
I feel like their words would carry a lot more weight.
Yes.
Because they've walked with you through your ups and your downs.
Exactly.
Their words, their opinions of you carry far more weight with regards to the identity you have.
And it would be very difficult for you to not want to kind of like be persuaded by their thinking and their approval of you. When Jesus mentioned when he was mentioning the sermon, when he was speaking about the, let me try to remember specifically. I think it was when he was talking about how we have to partake in like when he started mentioning like, eating of his flesh and drinking of his blood, and people are like, whoa, like, I
believe this was in John 6.
What is this?
So you sound like a cannibalist.
Yeah, like what? I didn't sign up for this.
Right.
And so the multitude of people that were there listening to Jesus's words all left, right? And being in his position, like thinking, like seeing that multitude that was there, like listening to like every single word that you said with such awe and astonishment, to now just be like, oh, whoa, like, no, you said something that I didn't understand, like essentially because they didn't understand, they didn't comprehend where Jesus was coming with that,
Right.
and they were like, oh, no, I'm not trying to do all that, leaving him. And instead of Jesus being like to his disciples, like, guys, like, I'm sorry, don't leave me too, or like, wait, but just stay with me, I'm going through this right now. He said, aren't you guys gonna go too? Like that's gotta be, that's like a hard line from Jesus, like, aren't you guys gonna follow the multitude? And then that's where Peter receives from the Spirit of God the revelation. He's like, where will we go?
For only you have
the
words
of
of
eternal life.
everlasting life.
You have the everlasting life.
What comes to mind right now, the closer you are with people, the more influence they have on your self-perception, because they're able to see things about you that you're unable to see about yourself. Because we all have personal biases.
We have blind spots.
I don't know about y'all, but I don't.
This is coming from the psychologist.
You just got to think harder.
He has more introspection than all of us do.
No, I'm just kidding. Far from it.
But it just goes to show that because Jesus had the perfect hierarchy of relationships. He puts the Father first in every circumstance, knowing that he came to earth on a mission. He came to save humanity. So regardless of what people might say about him, regardless of the false accusations they were going to, present before him, whether it be before Roman officials or his closest friends or the religious system of his time, to be able to maintain that level of stability, regardless of the circumstance, simply shows that the relationship with the Father, the way that God perceived the Son to be, that will grant you the strength and the freedom to do the Lord's will in a manner that is truthful to the Word, but loving towards our fellow neighbors. And I think, man, when our relationships are reordered to fit its proper order, like you said before, that man has a nature, we're called to function in a certain way. And once we align our nature to what the Bible calls to be made in God's image and likeness, then we'll begin to have a identity that does not lose its stability, doesn't fluctuate regardless of what people might say about us, whether it be the good or the bad things they might present before us.
Absolutely. I was just looking up this verse, which is why I'm on my phone.
Yeah, dude. I was impacted just now. I was like, I just had to take a second, bro.
Tearing up on the podcast.
Yeah, dude. I did not expect that at all. I was about to say, like, I'm so happy that we started this thing, man.
You know what's interesting? You mentioned that Christ was on a mission, and in Proverbs 29, verse 18, it's the KJV version. Hopefully I'm not taking this verse out of context, but it says, where there is no vision, the people perish, right? So Jesus was on a mission. He had a sense of direction, right? And I think a lot of people in this generation, they feel as if they have no direction, right?
Or perhaps they do have a sense of direction, but their direction is predicated upon things that are changing.
The wide
constantly. The wide path.
It's like there's a verse in Proverbs that says, there is a road that seems right, but it leads to destruction.
Of course. Yeah, I just feel like in our modern society, we haven't really given people a purpose to live for that isn't predicated upon self-assertion, which can lead to the degrading of a community. Sure, I feel like when you give people the freedom to choose their identity, that sounds liberating at first, but imagine playing a game of chess with no rules. There's no way that game could function. So if man is not given certain rules to follow, so they could not create their identity, but discover their identity, it's going to be very difficult to navigate through a complex and nuanced world.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
But Christ knew what his purpose was. He knew the framework of man. He knew exactly what he was coming to do. To change the status quo. To bring heaven down to earth. To do the Father's will. To die on that cross and rise from the dead. Once you know that, fully known yet deeply loved by the Father, that identity will push you to be countercultural.
Mm-hmm.
To go against the world. Not because we despise the world, but we know that there is hope for the world through Christ, to redeem the world.
Yeah.
The same way that Christ redeemed us and gave us a brand new identity.
You know what's crazy? I just feel like our generation kind of reminds me of the book of Ecclesiastes, where essentially Solomon was trying to find, pleasure, and we can say even a sense of identity and so many other things. Right, he talks about like building gardens and houses, trying to find pleasure in women,
in philosophy, knowledge,
and he comes to the conclusion that all of this is meaningless. And he ends the book of Ecclesiastes by saying this. He says, "That's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion: fear God and obey His commands, for this is everyone's duty."
That's. I remember reading when you came into my room when we were waiting for Phil, you picked up a book called The Three Philosophies of Life by this author named Peter Kreeft.
It's like
Job, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon.
Yeah.
In the first section of the book where he talks about Ecclesiastes, life as vanity, he put it this way. He said that when you read the book of Ecclesiastes, you come to realize that it's very different compared to all the other books in the Bible. And that's brilliant on Solomon's part. You never truly value the beauty and clarity that the light brings until you experience some form of inner darkness.
Mm-hmm.
You never experience life when you have a family member die. You never know what it's like to really value food once you've gone hungry for a few days.
Yeah.
You don't really begin to value life with God until you see the opposite extreme. Life as if there is no transcendent world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the book of Ecclesiastes, I think, it's such a beautiful entry point for people that are curious about the Bible, because it shows the opposite. What if the Bible isn't true? Then everything under the sun is ultimately vanity. Because the rich, the poor, slave, free, educated, uneducated, same final destiny, the grave. Yeah. That's our reality if there's no God.
I mean, what's the point in chasing all the success if at the end of the day you're going to die and no one's going to remember you in 100 years from now? And it goes to show, like Solomon says, he says, fear God and obey His commands. It's only what's done for Christ that will last.
Couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. I wanna actually read off this. I wanna read as you guys were speaking. I wanted to pull up this verse. It's in Ephesians 4, 22. I'm gonna hold it up because if I try to read it from here, I'll mess up. Throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. Instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. Put on your new nature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy. So we were mentioning before how our identity has been corrupted with the fall, right?
Yes.
In the book of Genesis. And that's simply like to kind of like concise everything together. Essentially what Ephesians is in the book of Ephesians, like what it's telling us is to simply like whatever identity that we think that we should hold on to, right? Let go and follow the identity that was truly set for you. Because there is an identity that has been set for us. And that's one that's in Christ. and to allow the Spirit of God to renew our thoughts and our attitudes, the way that not only we think, but in the way that we act. And we see that happen, bro. Like, we see that happen right in front of our eyes. Like, I know people, I'm going to bring up his name, our good friend Lucas.
Yes.
We see that, for those that don't know this young man,
Remarkable individual.
we're going to have him on the podcast as well.
Of course.
Without a doubt.
Dude, his testimony really, inspires me. Like, it's such a powerful testimony, because where he was and to where he is today is night and day. We're gonna have him on the podcast. We have to now.
I think
so that he can.
I think it's better if he shares.
So that he can share his testimony.
Right.
So I'm not gonna get into specifics, but just to see how to one day be like just his ideas and everything that we would talk about, I'd be like, bro, you're like here's where you gotta be. You're kind of like hovering, you know what I mean? Like, you're almost there.
You're not even in the ballpark.
To be now, dude, like, it's like night and day. It's like a different person, and
it's like a new creation.
A new creation. That's literally what Ephesians is talking about. This new creation, put on this new nature. It's now a new nature, a new creation. This identity that is prepared for you in truly righteousness, and to be righteous and to strive for holiness. Like, and to see it happen is truly remarkable. It's unbelievable. It's honestly, like,
it's supernatural.
It is supernatural.
It goes beyond the comprehension of man.
Because what else impulses someone to change their identity if not for Christ in that manner? You know what I mean? Like, why are we here, dude? Like, why are we here doing this podcast? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why do we go to our youth services on Thursdays at 8:00 at Portchester?
This is not a paid sponsorship.
But why?
HEWV.
Like, we could be anywhere, right? We could go anywhere. We could do whatever we want with our Thursday, but we choose to. And this is not speaking on our, like, this is because, like, we're good people and we do and we make good choices.
Far from it.
Far from it. We're far from perfect. But it's Christ in us, like, that drives me to, like, go drive to Portchester. I live in Pelham. Like, to drive to Portchester. Yeah, you live further, bro.
I live here in Portchester.
Yeah, you're right there. I don't know. You ain't got no excuse, bro. No, I'm just kidding.
I really don't.
But what drives us is Christ. Like, it's our identity in him. And to, like, just to run to him. Like, like, that's why we do these things.
I think seeing within our own selves that, because most of us here were born in a Christian household.
Yes.
But I do feel like there was a moment in each of our lives where the coin finally reached the bottom of the vending machine and the gospel message really clicked inside of our hearts. Having that transformative experience that we know came from God himself, to keep that within your heart and not share it with other people, knowing that the problems that they're facing are fundamentally spiritual, who are we to not give them the solution? To be encountered with true beauty, like the birth of a child or seeing a remarkable piece of music, it pushes you to share that beauty with other people. And these are things created by humans. How much more when we come in contact with the very beauty of the gospel message that came not from man's origin, but the very heart and mind of the Creator? That's going to push us to share that message with anybody, knowing that their fundamental problem is that they've lost that connection with the Creator. And the solution is to rekindle that relationship through what Christ did for them on the cross. And we see that in our lives. We see that in lives of people that didn't grow up in the church, like Lucas. And just seeing, someone transferring from death to life, that's probably the most beautiful thing that we can see in this world. Because that's the death and resurrection. To die to oneself and rise as a new creation. It's the story that we're hardwired for. It's the identity that stirs within us something that can't be fully explained through words, but experienced, embodied in life.
Yeah.
You know?
Powerful.
Yeah, dude.
That's the gospel. That's
the gospel.
that's what the identity of the Christian faith provides, something very transformative
Oh, yeah.
that can't be explained through words, but experienced in life.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
This was a good episode.
Yeah, dude.
I think so. I think
Yeah.
our best one yet, but this is the third one, so
Third one.
you know, from
Fourth
glory
one.
to glory and greater
Amen.
things.
A lot more to
Of
go.
course.
You know?
Bye,
This
guys.
game.
See you next week.
Peace out, buddy.
Adios.
Bye.
Peace, guys.
Peace.
Thank you for joining us on this journey to the highest order. Your curiosity fuels our conversations, and we're grateful for your support. Remember, every question leads to new insights. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and let's elevate our understanding together. We can't wait to see you again.